and welcome to Beyond the Drip, a podcast about home infusion, specialty infusion, AIC, all things infusion. My name is Jon Love, your host. I'm really excited that you joined us. This is our inaugural episode. It's our first episode of Beyond the Drip, and really just to orientate you on why we did this. I began to think about the infusion industry in general, and I was talking with a few friends about all the things that go on beyond the drip of infusion therapy, no matter what infusion therapy you're in. And so we started thinking about, the operation side and the tech and the services and the payers and the revenue cycle. And that led me to go out and seek the best co-hosts in the world. And I've done that. And so I want to introduce each one of those co-hosts right now. And so the first one I want to introduce as we talk about the technology and the data and the services behind what goes on in the infusion world is Brandon Carpenter. Brandon is CEO of MedEdge. Hi, Brandon. How are you?
Good morning, John.
Good. Hope you're excited, ready to go, ready to have some good conversations.
Listen, I love it.
Good. So we had that tech background. It's like, okay, so we got to go find somebody in ops, right? And so we wanted to find somebody who had lots of experience in operations and nursing and intake and all the different operations side. And so Pam McIntyre was the round one, pick one, draft pick. And so Pam is owner of Expert Infusion Nursing Consulting with Pam. I'm not going to say how many years experience in our industry of being a leader, but we're so excited to have you here.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, yeah, absolutely. And so after that, it was revenue cycle. Well, I'm the revenue cycle. My name is Jon Love with Prochant. Revenue cycle is kind of my world where I live in, getting paid on the infusion, all the high dollar drugs that we do. We have to get paid on it. But it's hard to get paid because we all dislike payers. I'm just kidding, but kind of not kidding. And that's why we brought in our fourth guest. And so whenever we're mad at payers, this will be ongoing for all the Beyond the Drip. If you ever have anything mad, you get to yell at Brian. Brian O'Sullivan, president of O'Sullivan Group. He's our payer strategist, our payer consulting. That's what he does, payer relations. So, Brian, we're so excited to yell at you for years on this podcast about what your payers do to us. Is that exciting?
That is. I appreciate being blamed for things that I don't have control over. That's life.
Perfect. Well, listen.
Come on, John. There could be at least one good payer out there, right? I mean, so if you want to say something nice about it.
We're still searching. Yes. Yeah. Listen, we're still searching. It's great. We're still. Listen, so we thought hard. Hey, we were going to open this up. We want to make sure that our guest one is someone that meets a lot of criteria. One would be, has a history. Another would be really fighting for infusion, and it was a no-brainer for us. Reece Norris, co-founder and COO of WeInfuse software, joining us as our guest on episode 1 of Beyond the Drip. Reece, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's humbling and grateful that you guys are putting this podcast on. It's just another resource. There's not many public resources, so this is going to be a great one. I'm very grateful to be the first guest.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're super excited. So, guys, we're 2 weeks away from, as we sit here, National Infusion Center, one of those big watershed moments, NHIA, NICA. We got a few of those moments where the whole world of infusion tends to come together, and we talk about those troubles. So we're going to get into all that in future podcasts. I think today, Reece, we want to pick your brain and do two things. One of the things we'll always want to do on Beyond the Drip is we want to bring on people and we want to hear their stories, because the reality is the infusion industry is made up for a lot of amazing people who have a lot of amazing stories, but also where they think the industry is going. And so I'll kind of open that, Reece, just asking, a couple of kind of questions here. The story of WeInfuse, if you got a couple minutes to tell it, where would you go? Where would you start? Because when I come to you, right, I just want to point out, Reece, I see you 5 years ago in this tiny little booth, and Brian with this, infusion problem solver tag, and you're over there, and I'm like, who are these guys, right? I think I'm COO of Rock Pond Solutions at the time, and I'm like, what in the world is WeInfuse? And where you are today is pretty astounding. And how do you get there? How'd you start?
Well, thanks, John. I think our genesis of the company of WeInfuse really dates back to when Brian and I were actually infusion operators. And I think that is something we bring to the table that's very unique among other software players in the space. But Brian and I, shortly after college, started a company called Innovative Infusions. And we first managed infusion suites for physicians. We then transitioned over to actually owning and operating our own infusion centers. So we actually started an AIC model with nurse practitioners. So we transitioned out of that management model, and then we moved into actually owning and operating our own AICs long before I think the industry even knew what an AIC was. From there, and along that journey, we kept realizing there's these gaps in technology. And so we actually built a legacy proprietary system for our own sites. And that was really the genesis of WeInfuse and the idea of WeInfuse.
What year was that, Reece? Give me a time.
Sure. We started building the legacy system, which we actually called Drip Sync. We started building that in 2009 and 10, probably designing in 2009, but really building in 2010. And Brian Johnson, obviously co-founder of mine then and still today, definitely more technology oriented than me, really took the lead in finding and developing that software. Again, at the time, it was just meant for our own sites, but it did plant the seed that maybe there's a larger opportunity. Fast forward to 2012, the end of 2012, we sold the infusion centers and that legacy software system to Paragon Healthcare. Paragon was another player in the Texas market. We were in the Texas market. They didn't have AICs. They had a home infusion pharmacy and a specialty pharmacy, but we really were able to sell to them. They saw the strategic value of having both a pharmacy and AICs, and I think we're way ahead of their time in that vision. And now it's much more common to see, and we'll get into this later, for the assimilation of all these different classes of trade and places of service. But I think Paragon was ahead of its time in recognizing the value of the AIC. One other thing I would add.
Pam, I'm guessing your ears perked up. You were a vice president at Paragon for how long?
I was in the intake business there for 10 years and then vice president of clinical services for 3. But I remember well the splash when Innovative came on and how that integration looked, and being over the revenue cycle on the front end at the time, we had to do some fancy footwork just to get up to speed with what you all do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and then along that journey of managing, owning, and then ultimately selling to Paragon, we had started the National Infusion Center Association, NICA. So Brian Johnson and I and a fellow nurse or colleague that was a nurse, Amy Arredondo, we started the National Infusion Center Association. We saw what NHIA was doing, the value they were providing and bringing to the home infusion channel, and really felt like there needed to be an organization dedicated to infusion centers. And unfortunately, there wasn't many infusion centers that even existed back then, but we rallied some troops and formed NICA, and thankful for those who believed in NICA early on as well. So I'll pause there. That's really the genesis of WeInfuse today. In 2016, we launched WeInfuse. We spent about 4 years, almost 4 years at Paragon post acquisition, and then we launched WeInfuse in 2016. It took a year to build, John, as you probably indicated. It was it was a small startup. We raised friends and family money. We scrapped by Brian and I's net worth. Most of it's in that company still today. And so we're very passionate about the space. But it took us about a year to get a minimally viable product. I'm sure Brandon can sympathize. You just have to have so many features available and readily available to be used for your clients. And again, we didn't know what that bar looked like, but it was higher than we probably initially anticipated. And our foundational software was built around AICs, physician offices that had infusion suites, and then management companies that were managing infusion suites for physicians. So you think about it, we really weren't even moving into the pharmacy, a space at all at that time in terms of software. We really wanted to focus on what we knew, and we knew AICs really well, and we knew physician management because that's what we did as well. And so we really focused there.
Yeah. And quickly, as you think about that, What made you say, okay, we're not gonna be AIC anymore, right? We're gonna go bigger, right? Because we're gonna do home infusion, specialty infusion. We gotta, I think specialty pharmacies on the horizon for you. Like, you and Brian, are you just guys who are bored and you're just like more and more, or what are you seeing that you say? I mean, we really were because I just want to agree with you and talk about the fact that you guys are passionate, and I think in a world where, and this is a little bit of a rebellious podcast, I'll tell everybody on here is a little bit of a rebellious and not that concerned about what we say. In a world where PE buys everybody and everything turns poor and the service turns poor, it's nice to see founders who are like, here's my cell phone, like, we're going to do well by you. So that passion, it comes out to why home infusion? Like, why go bigger? Why not just own the AIC space? Where were you at?
Well, and so I think, 2016, we built this minimally viable product. 2017, and this is all still the foundational software, which is AIC Physician Office Management Company. 2017, we get a little bit of momentum. 2018, we finally kind of hit our stride with sales and marketing. But what we quickly realized is as we're selling into, some of the larger players, is there's an underserved market in pharmacy, whether that's home infusion or specialty. So some of our larger clients had AICs and specialty pharmacies and home infusion, and really started to ask us, have you ever thought about building, home infusion pharmacy dispensing software or specialty pharmacy dispensing software? And the answer was yes, we had. We have our hands full at the time with, building an AIC software and an infusion center software. But it really did plant the seed for maybe there's a larger opportunity. Fast forward, we keep signing larger enterprise level clients, keep asking the same question. And then we are now at, I think, 900 sites. 900 infusion center sites use WeInfuse, which when Brian and I started, we were just hoping to get to like 2025.
Is that crazy to you? You're like, there's always that moment. Because, Brandon and I, we were on the team that built Rock Pond. And I remember when we had 300 customers and we're like, we looked at each other like, 300 people said yes to us? 300 organizations? Is that crazy to you? Like, remember when we were like in our basement and we were like, if we get 25, we'll be able to pay for our kids. And now
that's right. Yeah, we had the road to 50 and the road to 100. I remember those two initiatives, John. And so
and then we got to 300. We're like, how?
Yeah.
Yeah, and likewise, I think that's kind of where Brian, we set out to really like, where we didn't have a feature, we wanted to solve it with service. And I think that's really what sets us apart. And that's really been that's in the DNA of the company. And I'm so thankful for our client success team and even our sales team who've really bought into that. And again, we didn't know how much that would set us apart in the market of healthcare software, which is, actually, to your point, answering your cell phone, calling people back the same day, answering an email within 24 hours, or actually within hours, responding to tickets within minutes, not necessarily resolving it, but just saying, hey, we got this, we're looking into it. And that really, really helped propel some of our growth, is just that service mindset.
Are you saying that there's software out there that doesn't respond to support tickets?
Well, that's what we hear. That's what we hear. I mean, we're not perfect, but we certainly strive to bring next level service.
Yeah. So. I think last touch here before we start moving into the ops thing, maybe you talk a little bit about Patrick Lencioni has a great book. I don't know if everybody's read it, but they should. But put it on your summary. It's called The Advantage. Anybody read The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni? And so maybe you don't need to read it. I'll just tell you what it is. But a great team will always be really talented, dysfunctional. And so he has this idea of like, if you just get everyone on the bus who wants to be on the bus and wants to go in the same direction, and everybody on the bus that is talking about, I don't know why we're going here, or saying, I don't know why they're on the bus, and all you just say, you have to leave our bus, And so he's like the great equalizer to maybe I don't have all the talent or all the funding is a great team. You and Brian look like that type of team to me, just in skill set, in humility, and those things. And is that where you guys just work really well together? I mean, were you guys best friends? Did you grow up, or did you guys meet in college? You're Baylor, right? Both Baylor Bears.
Yeah, we both went to Baylor. So funny enough, we met and we had mutual friends in high school. We went to a different high school across town, but knew of each other, right? So like familiar faces in high school. When you go to college, you don't know anyone, or you know a lot fewer people, and so gravitated towards each other in terms of just, hey, we have mutual friends, and so we were both in the same fraternity and both shared a lot of passion for just business, and both entrepreneurship majors and finance majors at Baylor. I did go into law school. But Brian went to work in the infusion center business even before he graduated. He was helping my dad develop. My dad was in the infusion business as a management company. Develop some policies, procedures, build a website before websites were even a thing. Have a unique email address before unique email addresses were a thing. So Brian has always been ahead in terms of technology. So that's where and then there was an opening for me to join the company, and that's when we got the reins to the initial innovative infusions. But yeah, so Brian and I do work well together. We are very different. I mean, to the point where we have our own disagreements. We don't obviously air them publicly, but
sure,
it's always a good, healthy debate. And I think that keeps us sharp, we both push each other forward. Without our team, and I think we've been really, really blessed with an incredible team. And we don't hire people necessarily with infusion experience. To be candid, we really bring them in, bring the best people in and teach them infusion. And that's, again, I think been a really value add for us and like a game changer, honestly.
Yeah. So last thing, you have a saying on your wall. I think it's consistency compounds. Is that the saying? Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that? That's on the wall at WeInfuse. Maybe what's behind that? Yeah,
Brian, that's an ethos for Brian I believe in, right? Every day make small gains, and over time, small gains will be big gains. And I think, we had to remind ourselves of that early on, because you always want like the big thing quickly, and it's just about small wins every day. And if we're just pushing the needle forward a little bit every day, pushing the ball forward a little bit every day, moving the needle a little bit every day, we're going to, look back and in 6 months, a year, we've accomplished a lot.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Hey, so, again, the tenet of Beyond the Drip is really these 4 quadrants, right, of things that happen outside of just that drip. The first one's going to be, operations. Pam, that's your world. You've got access here to Reece. I'm going to hand it over to you and let you kind of walk us through.
Hey, Pam.
Thanks. I had to unmute myself. I have a giant hound dog in the other room that just saw a FedEx truck, and he saves me every day from the FedEx truck. So you piqued my curiosity, because, one of the things I hear from my clients on a repeated basis is, oh my goodness, the end of December is coming, and one more time, CPR Plus is going to sunset, and what are we going to do? Everybody wants an integration. And I think your point about home infusion companies with AICs or even suites is a really good one, because we got to stay deft if we're going to hit everybody and retain the referrals. How are you doing?
Absolutely.
The elephant in the room as you're making this module?
Yeah, no, 100%.
Can you do it?
We are 100% doing it. It's in beta. Do we wish it was a little further down the road? Absolutely. But again, I think what's really setting us apart and why we're winning deals today is because we're transparent about where we are.
Yeah.
We're transparent about where we're going. And if you stay with us in the sales process, you'll literally see every single month we're making, advancements on the software. And I think that's also, it takes other software organizations a lot of time to bring a feature to market or bring a feature to ultimately become live in production. We work in 2-week sprints. We measure that so closely to ensure that we have, really, we're building the right things and going to deliver. And I think that's what's been really neat. Folks that looked at our pharmacy software a year ago, we blow their mind when they look at it again today. Because of
Is that the goal? Is that the goal, Reece, to say, listen, look where we got? Like, where do you think we'll be next year?
Well, one, it's like even today, if you look at our pharmacy software, I think it's best in class. But even if you say, okay, it doesn't have this little thing that Keratin does or Brightree does or ScriptMed has or whoever the competitor is, we're going to build it and be there. But work with us as we do it. And by the way, again, you asked, well, like, why do we grow so well? One, staying humble, being teachable, listening to our clients. They're like, you can't listen to everything they say, like in terms of like to build every little feature. Right. You can't build custom software, right? But we can 100%, dial in what's best for our clients by listening to them. And I think that's been huge for us. We're excited.
Yeah. Your comment about the tickets and the response, I can attest to the fact that when you send an email, you get a response, because I am on the RX Toolkit bus as a fan, and I do have some stories that I can share. But I sent a message to RX Toolkit help one day. It was about 15 minutes later, I had a solution. It was like out of the clouds. So I appreciate that. When you talk about WeInfuse and how the RX Toolkit thing came to be integrated and the process there, do you have anything measurable or any success stories that you can share? Because I do have a couple from one of my clinics where it literally saved tens of thousands of dollars. But I'm going to let you tell me what you've found.
For sure. Well, and so for the audience, WeInfuse purchased RX Toolkit, and we integrate the platforms. Obviously, since we own them both, we do integrate the platforms, very tightly. However, they can be licensed separately. So those that license WeInfuse don't have to license RX Toolkit, and vice versa. And so we have lots of clients that just license RX Toolkit, and lots of clients that license both, and lots of clients that just license WeInfuse. Now, that said, Pamela, thankfully, we have some tremendous case studies around folks that use WeInfuse and RX Toolkit, and then those that just use RX Toolkit. In fact, a market leader, Solio, just did a case study with us. They only license RX Toolkit, and they just did a case study with us, which is available on our website, on rxtoolkit.com. You just go to social proof, and we have several case studies there that just prove out the value, not only in unifying training across multiple markets. Right? If you have a multi-site organization, training your teams is so hard, and making sure the materials are consistent, consistently distributed, and consistent content. That's what RX Toolkit does. It's readily accessible, through a web browser. It has training courses that are specific to infusion, CME and contact hours, and CEU hours that are available there. So you can tell I'm super passionate, John. You mentioned earlier. And here's why. Brian and I faced all of these issues when we were operators. We were literally like, okay, we've got a new policy on this specific drug. We would email it out and hope that the folks in San Antonio on our team remove the old policy from the binder and put the new one in. But inevitably, life would happen, right? And so I think, having something
that's where solutions come from, right? Brandon Carpenter, you see this, right? Solutions are coming from places where we used to have pain, right? They because you're building software,
but that's what I love about it, Reece. It's like, give me someone who's been on the ground and says, this is why this sucks, guys. And I mean, I don't have a good language for it.
Yes.
This sucks when we have different policies and different things. And this is so, yeah, absolutely. You gotta.
And it's interesting there too, Reece. You talk about integration. So obviously WeInfuse is a cloud-based environment, and a lot of folks are coming off of on-prem, right? So much so that I've seen folks talk about their server room in their garage. And that's a whole other onion to peel, right? But from your perspective on integrations, because people are so used to having access to the back end, what are some of the things that you've had to overcome as an organization to kind of get people beyond that? Because so many people are just, I'll be honest with you, I have clients today that think that it is still 2004, not 2024, in the way they operate, in the way they approach problems, and all this kind of stuff. What are some of those maybe scars on your back, or things that you're like, no, we're absolutely able to, handle a lot of these things?
Yeah, no, I think, Brandon, thankfully, so many folks are, have systems on the web already, and, but you're right. We still deal with on-prem, and we're a SaaS platform, so we're in the cloud, quote unquote. But, we've chose early on to invest in Aptable. Aptable is a platform as a service, which has a lot of additional security around, for sensitive data, and obviously healthcare is maintaining lots of sensitive data. We invested early on in being on that platform, and it has helped us tremendously. So they're SOC 2 compliant before we even had our own SOC 2. And so being able to lean on them in terms of security, but also, having a secure application in terms of giving folks their data. As we started signing larger and larger folks and clients that were used to having access to the back end of CPR Plus or their on-prem data, we had to do the same thing. We had to figure out through Looker. So we have a separate replica database that runs where our clients can access their data via an application called Looker and export that securely into maybe their own data lakes, et cetera. So again, we're having to solve for that, Brandon, for all the reasons you mentioned. And we've had to solve for it early on because a lot of our clients were used to having this, intimate access to their data. And so I'm thankful we did. And, all challenges we ever came, but, part of growing up as a software company for sure.
Yeah, Reece, you're going to I need you to talk me out of this. When someone on a health system tells me we want to be on-prem, I see like an 88-year-old man screaming, "Get off my lawn." And back in my day, it's like, guys, what, like why, Brandon? A closet full of servers is what we want. That's what we want to do.
Yeah. Well, and I just wonder, Reece, what you're hearing, but I feel like it's all about control, right? They feel like if I control it, then nothing bad can happen. But, when we think about, mid-February, we had this event that some may not be aware of, where cybersecurity and ransomware was involved. I just think like, man, a lot of these folks think that, nobody can do it better than us, except for the fact that folks like you and other SaaS platforms have such more sophistication and budgets to put towards that than, an independent infusion pharmacy. Even if you're a healthcare, based infusion pharmacy, you're like the redheaded stepchild of the whole organization. You're a rounding error more than anything. So how much effort and security do you think you're really going to get? And then balance that against the IT group holding you hostage for anything you want to do innovative or anything like that. So I'm curious what you've seen and things like that, and maybe even help folks understand the hidden risk or the intangibles there of, if you continue to try and stay on-prem, like as, cybersecurity gets more and more sophisticated, you're just going to fall behind the curve. So just curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something obviously even when we launched the company, just investing early on in, a platform as a service and that security. And then, to your point, Brandon, moving forward every year in terms of improving security. So you mentioned the Change Healthcare event, February 21st, 2024.
I didn't mention that. You mentioned
that.
Did something happen with Change Healthcare this year?
Owned by Payer, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Brian, we're going to yell at you here in a little bit. This is one of your payers. All right.
Just had to say that out loud.
So, and so thankfully, even before that event had happened, we were already working on our own SOC 2. So again, previous to this year, we've been really leaning on Aptable and their SOC 2 compliance. And now, thankfully, we're now a SOC 2 organization on our own. But that's a huge investment, Brandon, as you know. I mean, you're paying for a separate audit. You're paying for we literally license a platform to help us achieve that compliance. That really is monitoring our systems at all times to make sure we're compliant. And so, to your point, it's what we wake up and do every day. We develop software and try to make sure it's secure software. I mean, that's what we do versus an operator who has a lot of different competing priorities they're balancing, which is patient lives, patients, literally, patients that can die if they don't get the right therapy on time. I mean, an operator has just so many more things to worry about than just software security. And really, we have developed software, great service, and security. I mean, that's what we really focus on every day.
Well, and Brandon used to talk about this all the time during our rock pond too.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When
Pam,
you're
sorry.
talking about integration, the one thing I find in the clinics that I visit, and there are a lot of oncology clinics where people are looking to expand because of the payer push from outside the hospital system. There's a lot of softwares that are proprietary to oncology meds and simply furnish that suite of drugs because of the process that they go through for due diligence and double checking and really confirming orders with the NCCN database and on and on and on. Is this something feasibly that you think you might be able to integrate? Because I have a client that's using 3 different programs just to get their patients taken care of. And that is very cumbersome for a nurse when she's
when you bring up
mixing and
oncology,
checking.
yeah. It's funny you bring up oncology, Pamela, because we have we have several oncology practices that use WeInfuse, but today they're mainly focused on the immunotherapies, which are done in WeInfuse all the time. Now that we have a pharmacy module, and because some of these really the chemotherapeutic agents and a lot of the oncology meds are true. You're mixing multiple medications together, and I won't say cocktail, but you know what I mean. That we can now do that in WeInfuse, and so for the first time, in our company's history, we can intentionally go after that market, which is exciting for us. Again, having a pharmacy dispensing system really opens us up for home infusion pharmacy, specialty pharmacy, and oncology. 3 different distinct spaces where before we weren't really targeting those, and we're able to always accommodate with the needs of their business.
Well, that's going to be key when you talked about bringing updates to everybody at the same time, because with the new biologics, not everybody that administers these products are going to be oncology practices. And that means not everybody is going to be integrated with ONS. ONS had, just in the most recent journal, an article about how if you standardize the training system for nurses, it improves retention exponentially. And they had this program where everybody was learning about the new products or updates at the same time, and they were able to prove that it improved retention. So I can see where things being pushed out through the software on a scheduled basis could really be an asset. The one thing we've got to do is be able to support these practices that are
100%.
all of a sudden getting an order for Rituxan for a lymphoma patient. Well, they give it for arthritis, but if it's a lymphoma patient, same drug, they react very differently. So how are we going to be able to weave that into the training? And if we can somehow push that through for the staff that are on the front lines, I think that's going to be really helpful.
100%. And as you know, Rx Toolkit has aligned closely with INS and IGNS, but but what we still have and still need to develop that Rx Toolkit, just like WeInfuse is new to oncology, Rx Toolkit's new to oncology, and so we're hopeful that we'll be adding even more, training oriented around oncology within Rx Toolkit. There's some already, but it can obviously be expanded. And again, we're excited to go into this space. We're new to it. In terms of things outside of immunotherapies, but we're excited.
Yeah, Reece, I want to get down to the real story of how we get paid. Okay, because everybody's like, hey, we need to stay in business, right? Revenue cycle management. All right. So I'm going to ask you a gotcha question, which isn't a gotcha question, but right now I'm going to ask you for 3. Okay. The 3 things that you're paying attention to right now, as you look around, you've got you say 900 spots, all 50 states. I guarantee you every payer. You look around the entire country, and I'm interested in hearing your top 3 frustrations or challenges in revenue cycle management right now.
I think the reimbursement landscape, as you all know, you all are here and you all live and breathe this, it is so dynamic and it's so market driven, right? Challenges in the Northeast are different than challenges in, the Southwest. And, California, it's its own animal, as Brian O'Sullivan knows. And I think that's, it's really hard without national payer contracts for clients to understand that, payer markets are very dynamic. They're very regional. And they have what one payer will pay at 96413 on a certain medication, another payer won't. So really, it is a really, really hard. One of the things I think I always stress our consulting engagements when we help organizations start infusion centers is no matter what kind of healthcare background they come from, if they haven't done infusion billing, I don't know of another more complex billing methodology in healthcare that exists. I don't. And when people say like, "Oh, I've done anesthesia billing," or we had a large anesthesia group that opened up an AIC, right? So separate from their anesthesia practice. So like, we do anesthesia billing. It can't be any harder than that. And I showed them it was. And I was like, I promise you it is. And it's not because
I mean, John, how many times have you and I been in conversations with new directors of reimbursement from the hospital? I ran billing for the hospital of University of whatever.
And
I got this.
I'm going to throw us under the bus because we're so like cynical. We pretty much pat them on the head like they're a 9-year-old. We're like, sure you did. This is infusion. You are used to. I have a really really crude analogy, and I apologize for it given the state of the world, I suppose, but it's the only one I have. And I say, listen, it's like warfare, right? Like most of you are used to drone warfare. Right? It's very clean. You push some buttons, something goes over there, and you go home, and some outcome. This is trench warfare.
Yes.
Like you got a knife and a stick, and you're like, the stick doesn't work on this guy. You got to use the knife. Oh, this is Molina in New York. You better get a bigger knife. It's like
what do you use for Medi-Cal, John? That's the question I have.
You got to get a bazooka for Medi, right? You're in California, and you're still probably not going to hit them. Yeah, I mean, and people do. They come in and, I mean, Brandon, Brian, we were at a nuclear pharmacy. Well, you better nuke your idea that this is going to be easy. I can tell you that because it's not. And then they call me and they're like, we're going to write off $1 million. Yes, I told you you're going to write off $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other thing, right?
Are you saying we're going to beat up Brian really bad here in a second? You're saying they can come claw back things? I didn't know. Really? That's interesting. That the payer listen. And I tell you, Reece, I say, imagine that you're back in college, right? You're at Baylor, and you write a 15,000 word essay, okay? And if you don't dot an I or cross a T or have a colon where it's supposed to be, you get a 0.
That's right.
That's infusion billing. You don't you owed us $27,000, but you missed this tiny little thing here, so we're going to pay you $26,000. We're paying you 0. You can start over. I mean, revenue side. I mean, man, and I know that's my world, but gosh, I'm also interested in the side of WeInfuse that said, because when I met WeInfuse, it was real clinical, time based, everything, and then I got in there and I said, hey, do you work with WeInfuse? I said, no, I don't work with WeInfuse because I'd have to work with one of these other Carios or, and, all that. And then it's like, and then you decided to go out and build the RCM functionality. So 2 questions. One, why? I think I know why, but I want to hear from your, the real why. And 2, why do you think, and I think you do think this, that you can build a better RCM functionality than what's out there?
Well, I think, one, our clients, got really tired of using legacy, billing and claims systems, and we were trying to integrate with them. And there's always there can be compromises and integrations, and we heard over and over, you've got to have a billing and claims solution. It's great. You have this beautiful EHR front end. You need a PM or billing and claims, practice management, billing and claims. So we built it, and it's taken time. Obviously, the change outage didn't help us by any means, but we are dialing it in, and it's really awesome to see that teamwork. We have a dedicated dev team. We work in sprints, and billing and claims is one of our dev team sprint lanes, and it's awesome to see them, one, what they built, and then 2, how they've pivoted with change, and now how we're pivoting back. It's no secret we're going back to change, and so we're we're in it to win it. I mean, we want a complete solution, and that's why we built a billing and claims system. We do think we can build a better one because it's, to y'all's point, Infusion is unique in terms of billing and claims, and we believe it needs a unique solution. And things that we can do within our billing and claims system that are purpose-built for Infusion, I think is game changing.
So are you saying that what's in there now is not the future? You're going to keep going revenue cycle management. You'll keep functionality.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes for things we built. We even factor things we built that were working really well, knowing that it could be better from 2017, 18. I think that's what makes us, right. And I think that's what's been part of our growth story. And again, that's me, Brian, that's our whole team believing in iterating, innovating consistently each day.
Yeah, well, we're going to need it for sure on the revenue cycle management side. And so that's mostly. Now,
you said something. I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
No, right ahead, Brandon.
You said something interesting, Reece, that you guys are pivoting back to change. And I'm just curious. I mean, I've seen a lot of people say that the tail end of the change outage is going to be years to unravel, right? And I think in total they were down for, 6 weeks or something like that. So I'm just curious, why are you going back? And B, what kind of resistance are you getting from your clients based off of that?
So Brandon, shockingly, we thought we'd never go back. To be transparent, we thought we'd never go back. But then when you go to another clearinghouse and they're literally leveraging change technology, even post outage, to hop to a payer or to provide a claim edit or whatever, you're like, well, we're now making a hop too, right? We're going to clearinghouse and then we're hopping back over to change and leveraging some piece of change technology. That was really an aha moment for us. Is like, and these clearinghouses are all still relying on change even post outage, and so for us going back and just being direct and having a direct contact with a change rep and not having to go through a clearinghouse, which then is trying to contact change because they're built on top of some change rails. And so that's really why we decided to go back. Thankfully, our clients have understood. And, I'm not going to ever excuse what happened to change, but I think it will be a different company, a better company after it. I sure would hope so.
Well, yeah, and probably a good segment of speaking. Change is owned by United Healthcare, and United Healthcare is payer, and we're all mad at payer.
It's our favorite. It's our favorite payer.
And here on Beyond the Drip, when we're mad at payers, we talk to Brian. Hi, Brian.
Hello there.
Brian is our payer strategist, our payer relations, and Brian, I'm guessing you have some great conversations with Reece.
Yeah, Reece, I think we met half a dozen years ago through a client of mine. We have a mutual client that was using their software. I didn't know much about WeInfuse. And somehow, since John said you were going to be our first guest, I've been thinking about what do I ask Reece? When I jumped into the industry, first exposed to the AIC industry, like you would cut the wagon wheels across the prairie. But when there was no wagon wheels, you were the first out there, some of the first. What was that like? Even dealing with payers, did they know, when you said AIC, did they know what AIC meant versus home infusion therapy versus ambulatory infusion suite versus just you throw out the word infusion and they think, I don't know, oncology or something like that. What was that like of being the first messenger?
Yeah, I think, Brian, it was really challenging. We went from, that I think we really focused on how do we get to communicate to the payer what we are. And I think we said, hey, we're a provider office that focuses on medication delivery. And I think that really resonated with payers. And I think today, by the way, you said like payers back then didn't know what an infusion center is. Today they still many times. Many times. Now.
Yeah, nothing has changed, Brian.
Nothing. Haven't. And so like you mentioned the word infusion, they think pharmacy, they think dialysis, they think home infusion. We're going to give you an ancillary contract when an AIC really needs a provider-based contract. And so it has been very challenging. One of the reasons we started NICA was to try to coalesce different organizations that we knew out there that were facing some similar challenges. There weren't many in 2008 when we started NICA, 2010. But there were a few. And if we could just rally some troops, bring awareness to the space and the industry, thankfully we did, and we're able to do that. It proved very helpful. And to your point, like when you get like a payer nationwide audit, like you can use NICA to help communicate back to these payer groups. There was what really started NICA, which is a really cool story, was there was a national RAC audit, which is a recovery audit contractor for Medicare. Sure. And they were coming after anyone that was billing IVIG claims. And so we were like, what do we do? We don't have anyone to this is happening to everyone that we're speaking with, but no one's doing anything about it. So we literally started NICA to build a coalition to write a letter, because these RAC audits were inappropriate and they were actually wrong. Yeah. And the first major victory NICA had was pushing back against these RAC audits and winning. And from then on, the organization really got a lot of traction. But you're right, Brian. I mean, and John, you mentioned it, dealing with payers can be very challenging, but it's hard, right? Because in this space, in any healthcare space, you have multiple clients, right? Your patients are a client, your referring physicians, your specialists that are referring you to patients or clients. And then ultimately you may not feel this way. The payer's a client and you want to build a relationship there. And so to the extent you got to build a relationship with payers. It's really hard, but I don't know. That's how we always tell our consulting clients. The folks that have this complete edge in the space somehow break through the barrier and build a true relationship with the payer. It's hard though.
Brian, I have a question for you, Brian, and Reece probably, but Brian, I have a question for you, and I'm going to let you rebuke me here on a national podcast here. So I had at NHI, I was talking, actually, Brandon Carpenter and I were speaking at NHI, and somebody came up to me and talked about our payer partners, and I said, do not ever call a payer your partner. They are not your partner. A partner does not put down traps for you to fall in. Brian, am I wrong? Am I just being salty and am I just the person who thinks the umpire always calls bad on my team? Am I a homer? Is that what I am because I'm in RCM? Or
that's a tough question on a national podcast for some people watching payers all day. I'll just say that they have the checkbook, right? And that's an old term. So they have Apple Pay for those that don't know what a checkbook is. So to make friends with payers, I think is a logical piece of running a successful business in the healthcare space. Partnerships. I did a presentation on an NHI on value-based care. So those type of engagements, what's the old saying of keep your friends close, but keep your enemies even closer, of having relationships. John, you're in the relationship business and sales. I think relationships trump leverage every time. Trying to get in a fight is not as good as trying to solve solutions, which Reece is in the solutions business, right?
Right.
You make a living off of solutions, and I think that's can be part of, throw it under the partner umbrella that you're working together, you're collaborating. Different name.
Yeah. 100%.
So John, you're in the trenches. So man, you're to your point, you're in hand-to-hand combat every day trying to get your claims paid, and it's hard to see.
Yeah.
Other than that, I get it. It's
also, a payer is a grizzly bear. Don't go poke grizzly bears, right? Yeah. We don't want their full attention.
Right.
Don't feed the wildlife.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
and Brian, I am curious. I see, I see a lot of different size pharmacies and stuff, and some of them do have those relationships, but then you have those kind of small to mid-size that are trying to grow and tell their story and break into these things. And then they come in and these payers are just throwing everything at them from you've got to give us this data on a daily basis. And it's it's not even relevant and those types of things. So What have you seen from a success standpoint of those size organizations really telling? Now, obviously, we know Optum. Optum gets the best United contract there ever will be, and things like that. But for those smaller and regional type guys, what have you seen from them to tell their story and to really get into some good contracts?
Yeah, I was thinking about what Jon said, the warfare analogy of the rules of engagement are always changing, right? So you're playing by their rules. So in any sales situation, you've got to know what your customer, you've got to know what their needs are. So speaking to the payer as a customer, different markets have different situations. I have a client that might be a mutual client of most of us here that's in markets where 70% of the infusions going to the AIC space are in a hospital setting. The idea of we're going to open 8 clinics and move that out, that's a great message, right? Different than, we're in Los Angeles and, there's already many points of access. How do you speak to a more saturated market? Unfortunately, I don't think there's anything other than price, right? We're going to come in and we're going to do this a little bit less than everybody else who's already in network. So really kind of knowing your customer, whether it's United or Cigna or Aetna, and what their needs are, is part of engaging a payer.
Yeah.
So speaking of engaging, so Reece, the other thing I was thinking again back to the covered wagon. Salvador, we learned a lot of things through trial and error. So admitting here on a national podcast that we made mistakes. Mistakes were made. I think you said you've learned to innovate. What are some of the big takeaways you, just as the industry was, going from childhood to adolescence to maturity? Like, what did you learn in that pioneer experience that you think everybody should hear?
Well, I think that's what WeInfuse was built around, was trial and error. What we, or at least our initial software, right? They gave us the idea, like, there was no purpose-built software, so we kept making mistakes because we didn't have a unified system. We were using, I think Pam mentioned this earlier, that someone was using 3 systems. We were probably using 3 or 4, maybe even 5 systems if you took Excel, and we needed so we tried to start building a unified system in that legacy system. That was just proprietary to our own sites. But once we did that, we really saw how much that could benefit and how much it did benefit us. And then, we made so many mistakes, Brian. When we started, there was like 10 or 12 kind of core drugs. Now I don't even know how many. There's probably 50. Like when Actimra launched, for example, we were building a J3490. We weren't getting paid. We look up, we have all this AR, and then the pendulum swung the other way. Is everyone wanted J3490s because they actually you could bill percent of charges and get paid. But then payers started getting smarter. They started recouping all that. Now people don't like miscellaneous J codes. So there is so much you learn by trial and error. Certain payers want certain things. Certain 964. You can build a high level administration code. With certain drugs you can't, which I think we've tried to distill that into the software and make, where you can make rules around, billing claims or clinical, put some clinical parameters around things. The answer is WeInfuse was born out of trial and error.
Yeah. I think as we kind of wrap up here, I want to do a couple things, but tell me if I'm wrong. Reece, it feels like your story and the maturation, would your message be, because obviously the desire of this is to speak to the infusion industry. You just got to be flexible. You got to be savvy. You can't just get caught in we used to do it the old ways. Because we're talking about these payers, like we try this, we try that, we switch. Would that be, what's your message there to folks out there and say, hey, I want to go in this industry. I want to make it in this industry. Maybe I'm in it. I'm not doing as well. What would that first message be?
I think from the outside looking in, there's a lot of tailwinds in our industry. That's like why we're on this podcast. We've got, Brian mentioned, site of care optimization, payers pushing patients out of high-cost sites of care like hospitals into AICs. More and more drugs are coming onto the market. My message would be, despite the tailwinds, align yourself with service providers, whether they're payer consultants, RCM companies like Prochant, clinical experts like Pamela, technology experts like Brandon. Align yourself with experts, because it's such a complex industry. The rules change constantly, whether they're regulatory or whether they're payer driven. You just can't underestimate the complexity. And then obviously selfishly, we want you to use a software solution that's modern, that's interoperable, that's WeInfuse, if you haven't figured that out, or Arc Toolkit, or both. And so, my message would be, hey, outside looking in, there's lots of tailwinds. Don't underestimate the complexities of the industry, and align yourself with a good team and good experts.
Yeah, and so this is I've looked forward to asking you this question, last question, right? And so I've said, hey, this is we did all that just to get to this question. And so there somewhere in a basement in Dallas, there's a secret whiteboard that you and Brian have. What does WeInfuse look like in 5 and 7 years? Like, what are you dreaming of? Like, we say, listen, guys, like, what for all those folks listening, and you say, hey, trying to make decisions, I'm trying to think about this and that. What's on that whiteboard? What's it going to be?
Yeah, so we want to be the medication delivery platform for IV and injectable therapies mainly, but we want to be the go-to solution. When you're thinking of having a system of record, no other system even comes to mention, right? Like, you don't even think about looking at someone else. We're still winning on service. We're delivering innovative solutions, but that includes being a dominant player in home infusion, specialty pharmacy, oncology, continuing to integrate into other systems, and being that, like, we want to be at the center of your technology ecosystem, period. And in 5 years, that means we got to keep doing what we're doing and consistently every day win a little bit more. And then 5 years from now, we'll hopefully, be in an even better spot than we were today.
Man, thanks so much. Man, really appreciate you. And to all of our listeners, thanks for being on Beyond the Drip. We're so excited for episode 1. We're so excited to Reece Norris, co-founder and COO of WeInfuse, to be with us. Reece, we'll see you in Vegas in a couple of weeks. And thanks for spending this time with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate y'all.
Of course.
Thanks, Reece.